reflections to be an opportunity to commit to regular devotion and discernment on how we can grow as disciples and make disciples in the midst of tension in our world, at our jobs, in our churches, and yes, even in our homes. Hello, I'm Bishop James E. Swanson Sr. Join with me today in reserving some quiet time to reflect on what insights and directions God's Word can provide for us. It is one of the most amazing stories about our church that sometimes many of us who are not what I would call students of history may not know. And that is the fact of how did we get what we now know as jurisdictions within the Methodist Church in the United States. Basically, the seeds of this really go all the way back to 1844 when we made the decision over slavery. And we split as a church in the United States, where we at one time were called the Methodist Episcopal Church. And in 1844 we split, and we had the Methodist Episcopal Church, which was mainly all the churches in the northern part of the United States, and we formed the Methodist Episcopal Church South. And it was really around the issue of slavery. What happened was that as the years went by, there was a movement toward healing within the Methodist family. And in 1939, we came back together after years of negotiating to merge. The question, however, was, well, what do we do about African Americans who were still a part of the Methodist Church, particularly those who were in the church in the South? The other piece of that was stirring is that prior, all bishops were elected at General Conference, both in the Methodist Episcopal Church and the Methodist Episcopal Church South. That's where the bishops were elected. And they were then assigned all over the area without any regard to where they might go. So the issue was, by that time, the Methodist Church, the Methodist Episcopal Church, which was the Northern Church, by that time were electing African Americans. So the question for the Methodist Episcopal Church South is, if we merge, that might mean that an African American could get elected and actually sent to the South. If you would recall the history of the United States at that time, that was kind of untenable for many of the people in the South. They could not see themselves serving under an African American bishop. And so in 1939, we came up with this grand plan called the Central Jurisdiction, and where African Americans were literally all African American churches were to be placed into the central jurisdiction with separate bishops, with separate district superintendents, even though they were in the same geographic areas. So let's say here in Mississippi, where we wound up really with four annual conferences. We had Mississippi Conference, which was all white, and then you had North Mississippi Conference, which was all white, and then you had what we call the Upper Mississippi Conference, all black, and the Lower Mississippi Conference, which was all black. But also I found out later on that there were some whites who actually served in the Upper and Lower Mississippi Conference. So blacks were not segregated. It was the whites who were actually segregated. And so later on, what happens though is that we get this. Now, and this is the piece that I really want to get at. So what you have then, once you establish this jurisdictional piece, not only the central jurisdiction, you also establish the 5 other jurisdictions, the western jurisdiction, the south central jurisdiction, and the southeastern jurisdiction, the north central jurisdiction, and the northeastern jurisdiction. What happened then was that bishops were then elected in the jurisdictions to serve those geographic areas. And therefore, a bishop who was elected, say, in the West would only serve the Western jurisdiction, and somebody elected in the Southeast would only serve the Southeastern area. And so that's kind of what happened as a result of that. Now, I think, in my own way of musing about this, is that in 1939, that those were the seeds of us growing apart theologically. Because not only did we have this separate election of bishops, but we grew apart theologically. We did not have the normal interchange of ideas. We did not have the normal integration of thoughts nor debates about where we were on biblical authority or any of those things going on, because we didn't have to, because we were separated in all of these various jurisdictions. At the same time, we were practicing very powerful sin in our structure of segregating African Americans. And so even though we came back together in 1968 with the Evangelical United Brethren and did away with the central jurisdiction, by that time the damage was already way underway and was well done. And so now here we are today, very much segregated in our theological positions, very much segregated in how we really see things, and very much divided around how we are. That's why I say to people, be careful what decisions you make today, because the decisions you make today, your grandchildren may wind up being penalized because of decisions you've made. So you have to think through things, not just about what does it mean for me today, but what does it mean for my children? And what does it mean for my children's children? And when I make those decisions. Bishop Swanson, just kind of musing a little bit about the jurisdictional system and how it has not always served us very well as a total church. When it really kind of goes against the grain of what Jesus really did in his farewell speech that you find in John 14 through 17, where he said, Father, I pray that they be one, even as you and I are one. God bless you.